Whether you're an aspiring leader, an established executive, an at-home mom, or a young person wanting to grow and learn, Marsha Martin will share actionable strategies for greater happiness, success, motivation, creativity, productivity, love, health, contribution, and fulfillment. Welcome to Talk This Way with your host, Marsha Martin. Marsha will guide you through the basics and unravel the ABCs of communication, leadership, and success by taking the wax on, wax off approach to communication mastery, ensuring that the skills you acquire will make you unstoppable. So now, please welcome the host of Talk This Way, Marsha Martin.
Hey everyone, welcome. It's Marsha Martin here, and I am your host of Talk This Way, Communication Mastery. And we're being live streamed by Bold Brave TV. Last week we showed a rerun because I was in New York and not able to do the show live, working with a client of mine. And we're going to go over some of the things that I taught the executives so that you can have even better communication than you do already. First of all, though, I want to remind you to go to my website, marshamartin.com, MARCIAMARTIN.com, and sign up for my newsletter. Get on my list so that you get all the information. And really, thanks for coming. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the tools in your toolkit. One of our episodes was your toolkit and the language distinctions that you have as your moves in the game of business, the game of life. Your moves are in language. And one of those language distinctions is called assessments. Today, we're going to work with assessments and what they do and how to use them. And they're a really, really fun tool. Remember, your toolbox is kind of like you have a toolbox at home when you're going to fix something. You have a saw and a hammer and many, many other things. Well, the same is true in language. You have tools in language. There's a declaration, there's requests and offers, promises, assessments, which we're going to cover today, assertions, which we'll also look at, apologies, complaints, and expressives. Each of those particular kinds of language have a particular job in terms of creating results, just like a saw and a hammer has a particular job. So when you want to cut a board in two, you certainly don't pick up the hammer, although you could do it with a hammer, but it would be really a mess. The most economical, because it is made for the job, thing to use is the saw. And that's the way it is in language. Each language distinction has a job to do. And if you understand the jobs and how to use your language distinctions, then you can begin to be a sorcerer, have magic happen just as a result of how you speak. And remember, language is what brings things into reality. It's the bridge from the invisible world where you imagine and where you create dreams into the real world where things are real. Thoughts become things. And the bridge from a thought to a thing is language. So let's look at assessments. First of all, have you ever been in a situation where someone told you what they thought of you? Well, that would be called their assessment of you. They're giving you their opinion. And a lot of times it's not that comfortable, is it, to receive someone else's assessment, especially if they're giving you feedback that's negative, or as I like to say, constructive. It's fun, I think, to get positive assessments. People tell you what you're doing right and how much they adore you and what they want more of and how it's all working. And we seem to be able to be with that and to allow that to happen and have it be okay and not to feel too uncomfortable. But boy, the minute someone starts to tell us how they really feel and what we're doing wrong from their point of view, or what's missing in our results, or what's missing in our effect on the world, or our impact, or our influence from their point of view, Well, that's not as easy to take, is it? I remember this one time, my partner at the time was Eric, and we had a company where we produced seminars. And we had a staff of about 15 people. And one day at one of the staff meetings, I got the great idea that I should listen and hear what everybody's opinion was of me. Well, I have to tell you, first of all, when I first said that I thought people should tell me what they think, I thought they were going to tell me how wonderful I was and how fantastic I was and what I was doing that was working. And guess what? They told me what they didn't like, what I was doing wrong from their point of view, and what they thought I could do better. And I remember looking at Eric and saying, wow, I really asked for this? Because what happens when people make assessments of you is many times we take those assessments personally. And what happens is it jars us a bit. We don't want to hear what's not working. We don't want to hear what people think they don't like about us. So it kind of throws us off center. We call that being triggered. And it throws us into old behaviors when we're triggered that we act out. And sometimes our actions aren't really the things that are best to produce the result that we want. When we react to something, we don't have the same power as we do when we choose a particular response. And many times when people assess you, especially negative assessments, it will throw you off center. You'll get triggered, and then you'll go into an automatic behavior from some past event that seemed to work in the past. As I've shared in earlier events, that's how the mind works. The mind does its best to have you survive. And one of the ways it feels that it can make you survive is if it reminds itself of old events that look like the event that's in front of you happening now, and then to put that on a default, just like in a computer, where you suddenly go into those old behaviors. And sometimes those behaviors aren't workable in the current situation. Maybe you threw a tantrum and you got through it and you survived. And so the mind thinks throwing a tantrum now is the best course of action. So one of the things that triggers you is when people give you negative assessments. And let me remind you how we learn. There's two ways that we learn mostly. One is through our mind. We understand something. If you read a book and it tells you how to put something together, well, then your mind knows how to do that. It understands it. There's books on how to ride bicycles. And if you read it, then you're supposed to know how to ride a bicycle. But your body is different. It learns in a different way. It doesn't learn through understanding. It learns through practice. It learns by doing it first as a beginner and making mistakes, and then doing it again and again and again until you're an expert. Just like when you learn to play the piano, you could read a book on how to play the piano, but guess what? You have to sit down at the piano and play chopsticks in order to actually get good at playing the piano. Your body is learning through doing it. That's why we call it embodiment. Your body learns through practice. So the only way to learn how to receive assessments, especially negative assessments, or give assessments, especially negative assessments, to others so that they know what they're doing that doesn't work from somebody else's point of view and they can improve, is to actually practice giving and receiving assessments. And that's what happened to me in that staff meeting. I remember thinking, why did I ask for this? It didn't feel good. Here was my team who I thought loved and adored me, and I'm sure they did. But at the same time, they were actually giving me a gift. And that's how I want you to think about assessments when somebody assesses you. So assessments have a particular job. So it's really important that we learn how to give and receive assessments effectively. And that job is creating identities and enrolling. In other words, giving and receiving assessments is your enrollment tool. It's how you convince people to do things that you want them to do. It's how you convince people to commit to the things that you're committed to. So if you want to enroll a team into doing a job a particular way, or you want to enroll a person into going down the path that you think they should go down, you need to get really good at giving and receiving assessments, both positive assessments and negative assessments. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a short break. And when we come back after the break, I'm going to explain how assessments work and how you can get really, really good at giving what we call grounded assessments. Because assessments are opinions. They're never, 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 never true or false. They're what we call grounded or ungrounded. In other words, credible. You can make credible assessments by grounding them and be more effective at enrolling somebody into doing what you want them to do or being committed to what your commitment is. So join me after the break, and I'm going to take it totally apart and put it back together again so you know how to be effective in giving and receiving assessments. This is Marcia Martin. I'm your host of Talk This Way, and we're being live streamed by Bold Brave TV. See you right after the break.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. Rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies. Find settings that allow them to be the most productive and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Hi, welcome back. I'm Marcia Martin, and I'm your host of Talk This Way. And this is being live streamed by Bold Brave TV. So I was just sharing with you that I was on an assignment last week. Most of the week I was leading a training in leadership and communication for a corporate client of mine in Connecticut. And I had about 15 of their top senior executives from their whole North American team. And they came in thinking they were a team. And the training was for 3 days. And I was sharing with them and leading them in a lot of the things that I've been sharing with you here on this program, Talk This Way, about how to communicate and how to connect and what leadership really is and how language works. And it was like magic. By the end of the 3 days, people were coming up to me and saying that their whole life had changed. That this was not only information that they could use to be a better team, but it was information they could use with their family. And that's what I found through all the years that I've been training. And I've trained now over 300,000 people around the globe in the time that I've been doing this. And I've been doing this my whole entire life. And people say the same thing everywhere. This changed my life. So don't think of this as information. Think of this as something that you might not be aware of, that you know, but deep down inside, you really know this. I'm not teaching you anything you don't already have. I'm teaching you how to access the power within you. And I'm letting you know how things work, like language and your body and your mind and your emotions and the universe that you live in. I find a lot of times human beings know more about their automobile than they do about their own emotions or how their mind works. And that's just silly. But because we haven't been taught that, we've learned to read and we've learned to do arithmetic and we've learned about history, but nobody really taught us how to communicate and connect, how to be present, how to soothe another person, how to duplicate another person's experience, how to receive, how to listen. If you watch these episodes every week and you start applying what I'm teaching you, you will start to be more effective. And that's exactly what happened in the corporate training. And not only that, even though these people had, some of them worked together for years, they came out of that 3 days and said they knew more now about the people that they had been working with for years than in all of those years, because of the way we shared, because of sharing from the heart, because of understanding about how we work. And assessments was a big part of it, because when you're on a team or you're in a family or you have a person that you live with or you're married to, they will do things and not see how effective they are from inside the action. Because when you're in action, you don't see yourself. That's why having a coach is so important. A coach can give you feedback on what happened while you were in action. And I want to talk about two worlds right now. There's the world of action, what you're doing, and what we do is we speak and we listen and we move. Those are the three actions in life. You're either speaking or listening or moving. That's the action itself. Then there's a whole other world that is what we have, and what we have is different than what we do. What we have is an interpretation of the action. In other words, when somebody speaks or you watch them listen, or they're with you and they're moving, or you see them across a room doing something while they're speaking and listening and moving, you will automatically, because human beings do this automatically, make an assessment or an interpretation of what that action means. In other words, you are the one adding the meaning. It's just action before you add meaning to it. A person is just frowning. They're not in a bad mood necessarily. They could have upset stomach and be frowning. You don't know what's really going on. You just see and listen and see their action. And then automatically what we do as a human being is we interpret what the action actually means. The breakdown is this. Once we interpret, we start considering that our interpretation is what happened. We say, well, what happened was he was happy, rather than what happened was he smiled. And then we interpreted that it meant he was happy. So when you kind of break this down, you can start to see that our assessments of each other and our assessments of events are merely us viewing something and then interpreting what we think it means. And then if we're not careful and we collapse those two worlds together, the world of action and interpretation of action, and we consider that our interpretation of action is what actually happened, we get into trouble. So I want you to kind of separate those two things out. And then I want you to consider that when you give an assessment or you receive an assessment, you start to notice and are aware of what was the action you took that made that person add that meaning. So it's really valuable information to have, Because if you want to change their interpretation of you, or you want to change a person's way they see you, how you show up for them, all you have to do is change the behavior or the action that you took in the first place that gave them that interpretation. But you can't do that until you know what their interpretation is first. And then when you ask them, where did they get that interpretation? What was the action that you did that made them say that or think that about you, where they added the meaning? So we want to get really good at this receiving interpretations and assessments, especially negative assessments. Because what happens when a person makes an interpretation or an assessment of you, it creates what is called an identity. In other words, how you show up in the world for everyone else is as an identity. We don't really know who you are. We just know that we see you in action, and then we add meaning to it, and then that's our assessment of you, and now you show up that way for us. Who you are is an identity for others, and your identity lives in their assessment of you. So if somebody sees you, for example, sitting on a couch and you're slumped over and you're frowning, and somebody else is at a desk next to you and they're working really hard by writing fast and maybe being on the telephone, that person might assess or interpret or add meaning that you're lazy. Now, once they say you're lazy in their mind, they make that interpretation based on the action that they saw you take, and then they thought it meant that to them. Then you show up as an identity for them that way. And how they operate in life is with you as an identity, not with you as a real person. Nobody really knows who you really are except you. Everybody else sees you in action, adds meaning, makes an interpretation of what the action means, and then it's like a filter that they have over their eyes, like when you put pink glasses on. They see you through the assessment they just made of you, and that is how you show up for them as that identity. So we want to be able to ascertain what is our identity in the world for the others that are around us, for our family. It's important to know that. If someone in the family is thinking that you're stuck up, or that you're a liar, or that you're unkind, you would want to know that so that you could operate in a different way so that they could create a different assessment. Because who you really are, they don't see that. They just see you moving, speaking, and listening, and then interpret what that means to them. So first is to understand what an assessment is and how we can make an assessment credible. And it's really important because remember, this is your enrollment tool. So if you want to talk someone into something, you need to be good at making excellent assessments. Now, assessments are never true or false. You got to really remember this one, because a lot of people, even after I hammer that into their heads and say assessments are never, ever, 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 ever true or false, they'll still ask me later on in the day, is my assessment correct? Is my assessment right? They're asking me if it's true. And I have to say, no, it's not true. It's not false. It's never true or false. It's an opinion. It's just how you're ascertaining something is based on what you saw and the meaning you added to it. It has nothing to do with accuracy or truth. It's your opinion. Assessments are opinions. Now, we can make assessments more credible. And when we learn to do this, we call that grounding an assessment. Then we can get really good at enrolling people, because we can make an assessment and then ground it so it's credible. And I'm going to teach you how to ground assessments. And then they'll hear that that assessment is strong and credible and be more persuaded to go into the direction that you're opening up for them with the assessment that you're making. But we need to also know about ourselves in their eyes. What's our identity for them? Because if we're going to be effective in life with someone else, then we need to be connected. And to be connected, we need to show up as an identity that they admire or they respect or they enjoy or that they find influential. If our identity is one where they don't like us or they don't respect us, then we won't be able to produce results with them as well as we could if they did all of those things. Okay, so how do we ground an assessment? Well, the first way and the easiest way, I think, is by assertions. Assertion is another kind of language distinction. It's one of those tools in your toolbox. An assertion is either true or false, where assessment is never true or false. An assertion is something you say as if you could provide evidence for it. And it's something that once you say it, someone could verify it. Someone could look up in a book and see if the fact was the way you said it, or if you said how many flowers were in the garden, they could go out into the garden and they could count the flowers and they could come back. And if you said there were 12 and there's 13, they could come back and say your assessment, your assertion is false. But if you said there were 12 and they came back and they counted 12 and they told you, yes, your assertion is true. There are 12. So an assertion can be true or false. An assessment is never, ever, ever, ever true or false. It's just grounded or ungrounded. And one of the ways you ground an assessment to make it more credible is you add assertions. So for example, let's say that you considered Argo, which was a movie, the best movie of all time. You say, Argo is the best movie of all time. Well, that's not an assertion. It's an assessment. It's your opinion. It's never true or false. It's just grounded or ungrounded. But you could make some assertions and say it won the best picture of the year and won an Oscar, which is accurate. It did. In a certain year, you can look up and see that Argo was the best picture of the year by Oscar that year. And it also won the best screenplay. And it also won the best group actors in it. So there are many assertions you can make about the movie that make your assessment that it's the best movie of all time more grounded, more weighty, more credible, more enrolling for somebody else to agree with you. Once they hear all of those assessments, they'll start to go, oh, it must be a good movie if all of those things are also true. It's not just their opinion. It could be my opinion too. I'm willing to consider going in that direction of thinking it's the best movie of all time. So you can see you start to enroll people by being able to ground your assessments. When it comes to working on a team, you want to be able to work on the team with other people and to work on the team effectively with other people, whether it's your family or your husband or your wife or your kid or your professional working team. You need to be able to listen to, receive their assessments of you. And here's where we get into trouble, because we all kind of take assessments personally. Then we think, oh, I don't want to hurt this person's feelings, so I'm not going to tell them what I really think, how I really see them, how they show up for me, what my assessments are. I'm going to be kind. Well, it's not that you're afraid they're going to be uncomfortable. Really, what's going on is you're afraid yourself of being uncomfortable and actually giving some straight talk. And straight talk is important. And you want to deliver assessments with kindness, with dignity, and make them so that they are able to be heard. You don't need to go in and give them every assessment at once, bang, 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 bang. Start with some that are smaller that they can take and kind of build them up to their ability to receive. Because we have to develop both skills, receiving and sending. I, as a person, will feel uncomfortable giving negative assessments until I've practiced for a bit. You, as a person, will feel very uncomfortable receiving negative assessments until you've practiced for a bit. But we're both unwilling to practice because we think that it's about us personally, and we don't want to be hurt, and we don't want to hurt others. And so we shy away from telling people what we really think. But a person can't improve unless they actually know what the assessments are, especially the negative assessments. They don't know, oh, that's causing people not to like me. That's causing people not to have me work with them. That's causing people not to want to work with me. So after the break, which we're going to take now, we're going to dive deeper into some of the other ways that we ground assessments so that you can be more effective, either in finding out what the assessment is about you or giving the assessment to someone else. This is Marsha Martin, and I'm your host of Talk This Way, and we're being live streamed by Bold Brave TV. See you right after the break.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality? But it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating. Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
And welcome back. It's Marsha Martin, and I'm your host of Talk This Way, being live streamed from Bold Brave TV. And don't forget, go to my website, marshamartin.com, and sign up for the newsletter and get on my mailing list. There's a great free gift there about communication and leadership that if you sign up and are in my database, then you get that for free. I would love to have you, and you can find out about my other programs and my newsletter and everything else. Okay. We've been talking about grounding assessments, and the first way that we found we ground an assessment is to have an assertion that you say to kind of make it more credible. Like just in, this is the best movie of all time. That's an opinion. It won the best movie Oscar award in a certain year. That's an assertion. That assertion makes your assessment more grounded or credible. There are several other ways that we ground assessments, and another one that's really important is by what we call the domain that you're making the assessment in. So if you tell someone they're really smart, that's kind of a general overall assessment in all domains. And nobody can be really smart in all domains. So which domain are you referring to? Is it the domain of being an effective accountant? Or is it the domain of being an effective model, of wearing a dress and being effective in the fashion show? Or is it you're really smart at how you save the baby formula and ration it out so that you always have enough when the baby needs to be fed. There's lots of domains, and we want to get more effective in clarifying which domain are we discussing when we're giving somebody an assessment, rather than just saying you're brilliant. You're brilliant in the area of, in the domain of. And that gives a person some information about themselves so that they can be more effective in correcting in that particular domain. And when you're receiving assessments, you want to make sure that you're receiving assessments from someone who is skilled in the domain that they're making the assessment about. So, for example, if you go to your car mechanic and they tell you that you should go to the doctor and get your heart checked, they're giving you information about a domain of experience they don't have. So it would be stupid for you to listen to that particular assessment or to take it as if it were grounded, to take it seriously, to consider it important information. But if your car mechanic told you that you needed to get a new engine or a different kind of tire for the car, then I would consider that's a domain that they're skilled in. And so I would think it would be smart of you to consider their assessment to be grounded because it's about information that they're skilled in. And it would be silly for you not to take their advice. So one of the ways that you ground either how you receive an assessment or how you give an assessment is to have a particular domain. Another way is with time. Let's say that I'm interviewing somebody to be a manager, and I want to know from someone what their assessment is of this person's management skills. They could say to me, oh yeah, I worked with that person and they are great as a manager. Well, the most important question at that point is for me to ask them, how long ago did you work with them? And if they say 30 years, probably their assessment isn't grounded. In other words, I can't count on it. I shouldn't consider it to take into the consideration of whether I should hire them as a manager. If they worked with them 30 years ago, this person could have gotten worse or could have gotten better. Who knows which? So the closer it is to the thing that you're assessing that it happened, the more grounded the assessment is. The next way I'm going to talk to you about how you ground an assessment, and we say it's grounded or ungrounded, is a little bit hard to understand in the beginning, so take it slow. It's what we call authority. You, as the person being assessed, are the one that grants authority to whether or not the person and the assessment that the person is making is important to you. You determine whether or not you should consider it important to you. You're the one that we say grants authority. And it's important to grant authority to some, but not all. And many people make the big mistake of granting either too many people authority. In other words, they take whatever everybody says to them to be important to them and to work off of and to consider they need to think about and to consider it's important and whether it's possible. They give it authority to everyone. That's not really smart. Or they do the opposite. Some people don't give authority to anyone. And I'm sure that you've met someone like that. Say, I don't care what anybody says. I'm this way, the way I am, and I don't want anybody's opinion. So if you give authority to no one, that's just as silly as giving authority to everyone. What you want to do is to consider who would be important for you to grant authority to. And when you do that, we say, if you have granted authority, then it's grounded as an assessment, the thing that you're receiving from them. And what I would suggest is you give authority to the people that matter in your life. You know, some people walk down the street and some stranger walks up to them and says, I don't like this about you. And they go to pieces and take it personally and think it's important and try to change their life. and be a different way. And they just met that person 10 minutes ago. Come on. And some people won't even give their spouse authority. They say, what do they know? I'm not listening to anybody. I do what I do. And that's probably not smart either. So I would suggest that whoever you're working with, like your manager and your team, give them authority. Consider it's important to you what they are assessing. Listen to what they say and consider whether or not you want to take it in as good advice and maybe even change your behavior as a result of it. Don't just go, everybody in the company. If you have 30,000 people working in your company, one of my clients does, then you don't want to give everybody authority, but certainly give your manager authority. Certainly give your teammates authority. Certainly give your direct reports authority. Consider that what they see and what they're assessing and what their interpretation is important to consider. Give your family authority, your wife, your husband, your children. Now, there might be some crazy person you have in your family, and maybe you don't want to give them authority. So, pick and choose the family members, but at least your spouse and your children, I would suggest that you consider it's important what they think of you, and consider if maybe you should change the behavior so that a different kind of interpretation is made. And so you show up as an identity in a different way for them. They're your family. That's the person you live with. That's the person that you said, I do. That's the kids that you created. Make sure that they know that their opinions, that their assessments are important to you and that you value them, that you've given them authority, that they matter to you. So think about who you're giving authority to. Are you the kind of person that just goes to pieces when anybody says anything? Or are you the kind of person that considers who the person is, whether they're in the domain of giving that particular information and have a skill set or experience, whether what they're saying is relatable, they're talking about something you did last week or last month or last year, not 10 years ago. So think about who you're going to give authority to. So those are some ways that you can ground your assessment. And if your assessment isn't grounded, we call that a drive-by assessment. Somebody's just driving by and decides to give you your opinion. And one of the most important ways that you ground an assessment is to consider whether or not is the purpose of the person giving you the assessment so that you can be more effective with them in acting on something, doing something together for a future mission that you have. In other words, if it's your team at work and you're working on closing a sale and you have a presentation to make, then the person is telling you their feedback on your presentation to have it be more effective so that together you can make the sale, then we would say that was a grounded assessment. But if the person, comes by and says, I don't like the scarf you're wearing today. Well, what's that got to do with anything? Is it going to help make the sale? Or is it going to have anything to do with the action that you want to take with this person in the future? Or are you just driving by and giving your opinion, as important as it is? So think about what's the purpose of your assessment? Is the purpose of giving or receiving the assessment that you have some future action to take with this person that's important for some mission or project that you have to work on them, with them together on? And then we say it's grounded. Okay, let's see. Why don't we take a real quick break? And when we come back, I'll finish up and kind of tie this all together. So this is Marsha Martin, and I am your host of Talk This Way, and this is being live streamed from Bold Brave TV. See you after the break.
Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, Published by iUniverse, Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's? Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth. Published by iUniverse, Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back. So nice to have you here. I'm so appreciative that you're part of this show. This is Marsha Martin. I'm your host of Talk This Way, and we're being live streamed from Bold Brave TV. Okay, let's put this together a little bit, because one of the greatest skills that you could have in life is to be really good at giving and receiving assessments, especially negative assessments. Because if you understand this is just somebody's opinion, but once they make an assessment, how you show up as an identity for them is that assessment. In other words, for them, they saw you do something, speak, listen, or move. And then they said to themselves, oh, that means that person is stubborn, arrogant, truthful, trustworthy, likable, unlikable, lazy. All of those are just meanings that they've added to the situation when they saw you move, speak, and listen. So in the world of action, you did action, and then they said, this is what the action meant. And from that point on, that's how you show up for them. They see you through that assessment. And you can only show up for a person in the space that they give you to show up in. And the assessment creates the amount of space that is. In other words, assessments operate like the old cameras used to, before all the digital cameras and all the technology. Remember how taking a picture used to have an aperture, and that aperture let in or closed off the amount of light. And depending on how much light that you created, the picture looked a particular way. And that's exactly you with someone else inside of their assessment, or someone else inside of your assessment. The assessment creates the space. If you have a small amount of space, that person can only show up that particular way. And it doesn't matter if they show up for everybody else differently. You will be looking for and expecting the thing that you said they were before. The amount, if you have a small assessment or a small space, that's all they can show up in, is in that small space. You're going to anticipate that that's what they need to fit inside of. And in fact, if they happen to show up a different way, in fact, if even you notice that they're not the same old thing they used to be, you'll make an excuse to say, oh, well, the reason they're that way is because something happened, but I know who they really are. And you'll start seeing them that way, even though they showed up differently for you. So what we want to do is have you notice what your assessment is so that you can kind of pop it with the awareness you have of it. Because if you're aware of what your assessment is and what you're expecting, then it doesn't have power over you. But if you're not aware, we call it the way you listen, just because you bring that listening, that assessment to the conversation. You don't even have to wait to see how they show up to be able to determine who they are. You already know based on some past experience that you had. And just because somebody had a way of being in the past doesn't mean that they have to be that way in the future. People do change, slowly sometimes, but they do change. So we want to have you have a generous listening, a big space for the assessment that you're creating of them. We want you to listen as if who they are is brilliant and what is happening is possible, rather than listening for them to be lazy, stupid, stubborn, shy, which you assessed the last time, and so that's how they show up for you now as an identity. Just consider that you're going to allow them to be enough space so if they are brilliant, their brilliance can shine. Just consider them brilliant and whatever they're saying is possible. That will kind of pop the old assessment that you made and give room for them to show up in a new way. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't show up the same way they did the last time you made the last assessment. They might, but there's room for them to show up a different way in the space you've created. And that's what's important, because if you've only created a small space, the only way they can show up is what you're anticipating based on your assessment from the last experience. The other thing is to get practiced and good at receiving negative assessments. Because if you can stay centered, open, present, and connected while somebody's telling you their opinion, you don't have to take it personally. It's not personal. It tells you more about them than you, because essentially what they're saying to you is what they're seeing from where they're looking from. You're getting an inside door on their point of view. So if you listen to people's assessments, you can see where they're seeing from, what their point of view is, how they consider things, what's going on with them. You'll be able to learn more about them by listening to their assessments than you ever will about yourself. Because remember, their assessment is just meaning they're adding. They didn't even ask you, what did that particular action, when you were smiling or frowning, what did that mean? What was going on with you? They just assume their assessment, their interpretation, what they're adding is right. And it isn't always correct. So begin to have it be okay that you can confront and be with what other people think, what somebody else's point of view is. It's not about you. It's not personal. It's about them. And allow them to share, because once they share it with you, then you can say to yourself, is this how I want to show up for this person as an identity? And if it isn't, then you can say, what was it that happened that made you have that opinion of me? When did you make that assessment the first time? What did I do or say or not do or not say that made you have that meaning? And then you can begin to determine, do I want to do that again the same way? One of the greatest times I had with a great client was when I realized his whole team thought he was arrogant. And the only thing that he was a general manager of a big time hotel. The only thing that had happened was he did his work in a limo so he could get more work done. And he was kind of shy, and he would walk from the limo to his office. And once I had him start saying hello to people and tell them their names, hello, John, they started getting a different opinion of him. Okay, I hope this helps. And I'm so grateful for your being here with me. And next Tuesday, 5 o'clock, hope to see you again. Go to my website, marshamartin.com, get signed up for the free gift. And I'll see you next week. This is Marsha Martin, your host of Talk This Way. Love having you be here. We're being live streamed by Bold Brave TV. See you next Tuesday. Have a great week, everybody.
This has been Talk This Way with Marsha Martin. Tune in each week and discover that the effectiveness of your communication dictates the quality of your relationships, the profits of your business, the results you produce, and your overall success in life. Tuesdays, 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Bold Brave TV network.